Washington, the realm of water and mountains, where nature stages its most powerful performance. This is the story of a land that defies all definition. Volcanoes that silently shape the landscape. Rainforests that seem to emerge from a lost world. And oceans crashing against wild coastlines. A single state that contains the entire essence of the Pacific Northwest. We'll discover waterfalls that plunge into the void for hundreds of meters, alpine lakes that reflect snow-capped peaks, islands scattered in water, immersed in silence. But Washington is rich in contrasts. There are lunar deserts and forests that never see the sun, cutting-edge tech cities, and untamed landscapes where time has stood still for millennia. Welcome to this journey through the most beautiful places and hidden wonders of Washington State, where adventure grows as lush as the fir trees, and every trail leads to marvels that redefine the very meaning of beauty. Olympic National Park. Three different ecosystems enclosed in a single wild reserve. Here in the heart of Washington State, you can walk among temperate rainforests in the morning and find yourself on beaches battered by Pacific waves in the afternoon. The park preserves one of the few remaining examples of temperate rainforest in the continental United States, where Douglas firs over 230 feet tall create true natural cathedrals. But that's not all. Moving inland, the trails will take you through alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers, up to the permanent glaciers of the Olympic Mountains. The geographic isolation of this peninsula has created unique species that you won't find anywhere else. The Olympic trout and the varied thrush are just two examples. Every step here reveals how nature manages to be incredibly diverse, even in relatively small spaces. And among all these extraordinary environments, the Hoh Rainforest is certainly the one that will leave you breathless. The silence here becomes almost tangible. Under the green canopy formed by giant maples, Sitka spruces, and western hemlocks, every surface is covered with moss that absorbs every sound. Walking along the Hoh River Trail means entering a forest where light barely filters through, creating golden beams that illuminate the moisture particles suspended in the air. The forest, in fact, receives over 10 feet of rain annually, transforming every fallen trunk into a hanging garden where ferns, mosses, and small firs grow. The salmon that swim upstream the river, moreover, bring nutrients from the ocean. Black bears and elk, instead, leave tracks on the trails, and bald eagles nest on the highest branches. This forest is living proof that abundance is born from perfect balance. Mount Rainier National Park. "14,000 feet of pure majesty that dominates Seattle's horizon." Mount Rainier isn't just a mountain, but a sleeping giant that has shaped the entire surrounding landscape. Its 26 glaciers feed rivers that flow in all directions, while its past eruptions have created the valleys that today host forests of firs and alpine meadows. In summer, when the snow retreats, the Paradise and Sunrise areas become explosions of color. Purple lupines, red castilleria, and alpine daisies transform the slopes into living carpets. But it's the vastness that really strikes you. From the summit, the view spans from the Pacific Ocean to the Cascade Range mountain chain, embracing thousands of square miles of wilderness. Here you understand why Native Americans called this mountain Tacoma, which means the mountain that touches the clouds. And this wasn't just a name, it was a daily truth. North Cascades National Park. Welcome to the Alps of America. Over 300 glaciers continuously sculpt these mountains, creating a landscape that seems to emerge from the Dolomites, but with an entirely American wildness. The granite peaks rise steeply from the valleys, where lakes of an impossible turquoise reflect rock walls that defy gravity. Lake Diablo, for example, owes its unreal color to the finest glacial sediments, which are rock particles so fine they diffuse light in a unique way. In this park, however, don't expect simple trails, because nature allows itself to be conquered only by those willing to work a little. But the reward is nonetheless extraordinary, with every mile revealing breathtaking panoramas. Furthermore, this is the least visited national park in Washington state, and which means only one thing: You'll be able to experience the majesty of these mountains almost in solitude. Mount Adams. The forgotten giant of the Pacific Northwest rises solitary, just exceeding 12,000 feet. In fact, while everyone looks at Mount Rainier, Mount Adams reigns undisturbed over its portion of the Cascade Range. Its perfectly conical shape reveals its volcanic origin, but what truly impresses is the majestic solitude that reigns around it. From Yakima to Portland, this mountain dominates the eastern horizon, yet remains surprisingly wild. Its slopes host one of the largest elk herds in North America, while its glaciers feed the Klickitat River. In autumn, when the larches turn golden and the air becomes crystalline, Mount Adams reveals its true nature. It's not anyone's little brother, it's simply a mountain that doesn't need to shout to be noticed. And its grandeur and beauty lies precisely in this regal discretion. Mount St. Helens. On May 18, 1980, at 8:32 in the morning, this mountain rewrote the geography of the Pacific Northwest. An explosion swept away 1,300 feet of height and created a crater over half a mile wide. But what you see now isn't destruction, but rebirth. Nature has reclaimed these lands with incredible force. In fact, where there was once only ash and mud, now young forests and flowering meadows grow. The Johnston Ridge Observatory brings you face to face with the smoking crater, while the Visitor Center tells how life returns stronger than before. Elk graze among the trunks of dead trees, beavers have rebuilt their dams in the new lakes, and Spirit Lake reflects a landscape that seems alien but pulses with vitality. This is the most powerful lesson that nature can give us, because even the most total destruction is only the beginning of a new story. Seattle. Among the hills that dive into the Puget Sound estuary, Seattle spreads like a metropolis that has made reinvention its trademark. Glass and steel skyscrapers reflect the clouds while neighborhoods climb the slopes, creating a unique urban topography. This is the city that gave the world the grunge music genre and technology, quality coffee and e-commerce giants, and all while maintaining a strong and unmistakable identity. Water, moreover, defines every perspective. Elliott Bay opens the horizon westward, while Lake Union and Lake Washington embrace the city, creating peninsulas and inlets that break the urban grid. Ferries constantly move between the islands, carrying commuters and tourists without ever stopping. But it's the Space Needle that captures Seattle's essence. This futuristic tower built for the 1962 World's Fair, with its characteristic flying saucer shape, isn't just an architectural icon, but is the symbol of a city that has always looked ahead. From its 600-foot height, the panorama embraces everything. You can see the snow-capped peaks of the Cascades, Mount Rainier dominating the southern horizon, and even the infinite waters of the Pacific. Seattle metropolitan area. Beyond downtown Seattle extends an urban mosaic that redefines the concept of American suburbs. Bellevue, for example, shines with its skyscrapers that host tech giants, creating a skyline that rivals Seattle's, but with a style all its own. The streets are wider, the park's more manicured, and Lake Washington offers postcard views. Then there's Kirkland, which embraces the eastern shore of the lake, with a charm that mixes urban elegance and small-town atmosphere. Its shops and restaurants on the waterfront create a sophisticated but relaxed atmosphere. And finally, we find Edmonds, which looks toward Puget Sound in the Olympic Mountains, offering sunsets that paint the sky orange, while ferries connect the mainland to the islands. This, however, isn't disorderly urban sprawl, as it might seem at first glance. It's a symphony of communities that have managed to grow while each maintaining their own identity, creating a metropolitan area that truly works. Tacoma. What happens when an industrial city decides to completely reinvent itself? Tacoma is the answer. Where smokestacks once smoked and pneumatic hammers resounded, today museums and artistic neighborhoods rise, that pulse with creativity. Along the streets of the historic downtown stand architectural testimonies, like the First Presbyterian Church with its imposing clock tower that marks the time of a city in constant transformation. But the real spectacle begins when you cross the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Below, in fact, Puget Sound opens up with its waters that change color depending on the wind, while on the horizon, Mount Rainier watches over the city like a protective father. Point Defiance Park instead encompasses 700 acres of forests, beaches, and zoo, demonstrating how Tacoma has managed to balance urban progress and wild nature. This, therefore, is no longer just the City of Steel, but is the laboratory where the future of the Northwest takes shape. Spokane. In the heart of Washington's interior, where prairies meet forests, Spokane spreads along the banks of the river of the same name, with a character all its own. The city itself preserves architecture that tells of its golden age, when timber and mining magnates built palaces worthy of European capitals. And then there are the Spokane Falls, which roar right in the city center, creating a natural spectacle that has shaped local history since the time of native tribes. Riverfront Park transforms former industrial areas into green spaces, with the sound of water mixing with the voices of children playing. But this city has a secret. It's the gateway to some of the most remote wilderness areas of the Northwest. Half an hour away by car, in fact, forests begin that extend to Idaho and Montana, clear lakes hidden among the hills, and trails that lead to idyllic panoramas. Bellingham. Imagine a city nestled between sparkling bays and mountains covered with forests. Bellingham is exactly this, and spreads along its bay, with that vibrant energy that characterizes Pacific Northwest centers. The historic downtown preserves the charm of old port districts, where red brick buildings tell stories of sailors and timber merchants. But it's the geographic position that makes Bellingham special. To the north open the San Juan Islands. To the east, the North Cascades promise alpine adventures, while to the west, the Pacific Ocean offers sunsets that set the horizon ablaze. Fairhaven, the historic district, maintains the atmosphere of gold rush times, with vintage shops and coffee shops that serve perhaps the best coffee in the Northwest. And it's right here that Pacific Northwest culture expresses itself at its best. Outdoor lifestyle, environmental sustainability, and a quality of life that makes much larger metropolises envious. Puget Sound. "43 miles of salt water that transforms Washington's landscape into an urban archipelago." Puget Sound isn't just a bay, but the pulsing heart of the region, where cities, islands, and wild nature intertwine in a unique mix. Its waters host resident orcas, seals, and sea lions, while along the coasts alternate pebble beaches, cliffs covered with firs, and ports that smell of fresh salmon. Ferries transform every trip into a mini-cruise and go from Seattle to Bainbridge Island, or from Edmonds to Kingston, and every crossing offers panoramas that change with the seasons and atmospheric conditions. But when the morning fog rises from the waters, it reveals a fairy tale landscape where modern skyscrapers stand alongside primordial forests. It's here that you understand why the Pacific Northwest has inspired generations of artists, writers, and visionaries. Rialto Beach. Prepare for a visual impact that redefines the concept of beach. Rialto Beach welcomes you with giant logs bleached by salt and amassed by the Pacific's force like natural sculptures. And the ocean here doesn't mess around. There are waves that arrive from thousands of miles that crash on black rocks called sea stacks, creating foam geysers that reach incredible heights. But Rialto's real treasure hides among the volcanic rocks. When the tide retreats, in fact, natural pools are revealed that guard a miniature universe. We find sea anemones in bright colors, starfish that move slowly, and small crabs that run among the seaweed. It's a natural aquarium that changes appearance with every tide, always offering new discoveries to the most attentive explorers. Rosario Beach. Hidden on Fidalgo Island, this gem of Deception Pass State Park proves that not all treasures are easy to find. Rosario Beach is reached through a trail that passes among Douglas firs and madronas until it emerges on a protected bay where Puget Sound water takes on tones ranging from emerald green to cobalt blue. When the tide retreats, the pools among the rocks transform into natural aquariums where you can observe purple starfish, spiny sea urchins, and colorful anemones that live in this miniature ecosystem. But the real spectacle arrives at sunset when the red rocks that give the beach its name light up with golden reflections. Furthermore, the currents of deception pass visible from the beach, create whirlpools and rapids that make this stretch of sea one of the most spectacular and feared by Puget Sound navigators. Cape Flattery. The northwesternmost point of the continental United States deserves a journey to the edges of the known world. Cape Flattery extends into the Pacific like the bow of a giant ship, offering panoramas that span from the oceanic infinite to the jagged coasts of Vancouver Island. The trail to reach the viewpoint crosses a temperate rainforest with millennial cedars and a deafening silence, interrupted only by the distant sound of waves that crash on the cliffs. Tatoosh Island, moreover, with its automatic lighthouse, floats like an outpost in nothingness, while the currents clash, creating whirlpools and foam that reveal the power of the underlying waters. This is Maka tribe territory, guardians of these lands for over 2,000 years, and every step reminds us that we're walking on still, sacred land. Anacortes. Gateway to the San Juan Islands. Anacortes spreads on Fidalgo Island like a town that has managed to maintain its maritime authenticity. The port bustles with activity, with ferries connecting the islands, fishing boats bringing fresh salmon, and yachts promising adventures among the channels. But this town has a soul that goes beyond tourism. It's a community of fishermen, artists, and sea lovers who have transformed this city into a reference point for the entire archipelago. Cap Sante Park offers one of the most suggestive panoramas in the area, with its trails that wind through coastal vegetation until reaching beautiful viewpoints. Mount Erie, moreover, reachable by car, offers 360-degree views of Puget Sound, the Cascade Mountains, and the islands scattered in the water. Anacortes, therefore, is a destination that makes itself loved for its relaxed pace and for the genuine hospitality of the Pacific Northwest. Deception Pass Bridge. Two steel spans that cross one of the most dramatic scenes of the Pacific Northwest. The Deception Pass Bridge connects Fidalgo Island to Whidbey Island, offering a vertiginous view of one of Puget Sound's busiest water passages. Under the bridge, tidal currents create whirlpools and rapids that have made this passage famous and feared among navigators. The waters contrast with the fir forests that descend to the shore, while rocky islets emerge like backs of sleeping whales. The state park that surrounds the bridge offers trails that lead to even more spectacular viewpoints, proving that sometimes the most beautiful destination is precisely the journey to get there. Besides being a symbol of engineering, this bridge is a window onto America's most complex and fascinating geography. Lake Chelan. "31 miles of crystalline water, set among mountains that rise up to 8,200 feet. Lake Chelan extends like a blue blade in the heart of the North Cascades, and its elongated shape, which is given by the glaciers of the Ice Age, that carved a depression over 1,500 feet deep. This exceptional depth keeps the waters cool even during the hottest summers, creating a perfect microclimate for viticulture along the southern shores. Lake Chelan's waters change color during the day, passing from the deep blue of morning to the brilliant turquoise of afternoon, when the sun penetrates the more superficial layers. It's a lake that invites contemplation with its majestic dimensions and the mountain frame that surrounds it, offering different scenery at every curve of its sinuous shores. Lake Washington. "21 miles long and 3 miles wide, this urban lake transforms Seattle into a lakeside city that has no equal in America. Lake Washington separates indeed Seattle from Bellevue, but also unites them through 2 floating bridges that are engineering miracles. Its waters host university teams that train at dawn, while the shores offer sandy beaches where families gather during the Northwest's mild summers. But it's the urban integration that makes this lake special. Elegant neighborhoods face directly onto the water, public parks guarantee access to everyone, and a bike path runs along most of the perimeter. There's also Mercer Island, which floats in the center like a residential oasis. This lake demonstrates that urban progress and natural beauty aren't incompatible, but only need vision and respect for the environment that surrounds us. Lake Crescent. Seven and a half miles of water, so transparent that trout seem to swim suspended in the void. This lake, 590 feet deep, guards secrets that date back to the last ice age. Its icy waters, in fact, have preserved fallen tree trunks for decades, creating a submerged forest visible from the shores. Mount Storm King, moreover, reflects perfectly in the calm waters, while the Lake Lodge maintains the charm of the 1930s alive. But what makes this place magical is the silence. No motors, only kayaks that glide in water between water splashes and wind rustling. Snoqualmie Falls. "270 feet of free fall that transform the Snoqualmie River into a natural spectacle accessible to all. The river, in fact, is born from the snows of Snoqualmie Pass, crossing forests of firs and cedars before concentrating all its force in this dramatic waterfall. The falls plunge into a pool surrounded by rock walls, where giant ferns and mosses grow that transform every surface into a vertical garden. For the Snoqualmie tribe, this place is sacred. It's the place where the spirits of ancestors live in the mist that rises from the waters. The Salish Lodge, perched above the falls, transforms every breakfast into a spectacle, while the trail to the base crosses a forest where centuries-old cedars create true natural cathedrals. Lake Roosevelt. Behind the Grand Coulee Dam extends Washington State's longest artificial lake. 150 miles of water that have transformed the Columbia River into a navigable corridor. Being artificial in nature, this lake tells a typically American story, and that is the ability to redesign geography to create progress. Its rocky shores emerge from waters that change level according to the dam's needs, creating lunar landscapes dotted with hidden bays, and that host a surprisingly rich fish fauna. Houseboats move lazily along the river, while fishermen chase salmon and trout among the canyons that tell millions of years of geological history. This is certainly the demonstration that man can change the landscape, creating new forms of beauty that work. Lake Alder. What happens when you dam a river that descends from Mount Rainier? Simple. Lake Alder is born. A basin that transforms the mountain's energy into electricity for 500,000 homes. But this lake has a double personality, and that is hydraulic engineering and paradise for fishermen. During summer, moreover, when the water level drops, giant fossilized trunks emerge from the lake that create a surreal landscape, transforming the basin into a natural museum where the valley's ancient history resurfaces from the depths. Its waters reflect Mount Rainier's perfect silhouette when the air is clear, attracting photographers from the area, while the 1945 dam demonstrates how man can collaborate with nature instead of fighting it. Yakima River. 211 miles of water that cross Washington's agricultural heart, transforming deserts into gardens. The Yakima River is born from the Cascade Mountains and flows through the Yakima Valley, irrigating vineyards that produce award-winning wines and orchards that supply half the continent. But this in the upper parts flows impetuously, offering rapids that delight rafters, while further downstream it slows, creating meanders that attract blue herons and beavers. There are also Chinook salmon that still swim upstream this river despite the dams, demonstrating incredibly strong tenacity. Every spring, snow melting transforms the Yakima into a torrent of pure energy, while in winter its waters calm, allowing the river to recharge the underground aquifers that will feed the next year's harvest. This is undoubtedly the river that made civilization possible in the desert. Skycomish River. Born from the North Cascades glaciers and runs toward Puget Sound, with the fury of a torrent that accepts no compromises. The Sky, as locals call it, is legend among fishermen. In fact, its cold waters attract king salmon, silver salmon, and trout in one of the Northwest's most spectacular migrations. Obviously, don't expect a calm river. Its Class 3 and 4 rapids test the most expert rafters, while Highway 2, which is the scenic road that follows the river's course, offers incredible glimpses of the canyons. The lodges along its shores offer perfect refuge after a day of intense fishing. Many are built in rustic style with local wood and boast expert guides who know every pool and every current of the river. The atmosphere, moreover, is that authentic of the Northwest. Lit fireplaces, tales of legendary catches, and the promise of waking up to the sound of water that flows fast toward the sea. La Conner. A fairy tale village along the Swinomish Channel, where Victorian houses preserve the pioneering charm of when this was an important port for the timber trade. Today, the old houses host shops and restaurants that serve the freshest seafood in the area. Martha's Beach offers a quiet refuge along the channel and is a small sandy beach of about 1,300 feet that a local resident donated to the city. Nearby, isolated rock emerges solitary from the mudflats and is a natural rock formation that during low tide becomes visible and accessible. But the real gem are the surrounding wetlands. A swamp ecosystem that hosts herons, ducks, kingfishers, and countless migratory species. The trails through the marshes allow you to immerse yourself in this aquatic world, where silence is broken only by the rustle of reeds and the calls of birds. Port Townsend. Stop and breathe. Port Townsend is the gateway to a natural paradise that extends well beyond the city limits, where the Olympic Peninsula reveals its wildest treasures. In the harbor, vintage sailboats and modern yachts sway gently, while the Victorian town climbs the hill with its pastel-colored houses that look at the bay. Kala Point emerges as a spectacular promontory that extends into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, offering wild panoramas of the waters and the San Juan Islands. The trails that wind through the forest lead to cliffs rich with bald eagles, seals, and orcas. The coast breaks into hidden bays and pebble beaches, while the temperate rainforests that surround the area host black-tailed deer, raccoons, and the occasional black bear. Here, Pacific Northwest nature shows all its primitive and uncontaminated power. Leavenworth. How do you transform a dying town into a successful destination? Leavenworth found the answer precisely in Bavarian architecture. In the 1960s, in fact, when the timber industry was in crisis, the inhabitants decided to completely reinvent their city, transforming every building into a replica of German architecture. In winter, snow transforms the city into a Christmas village, while in summer, bike paths and trails offer adventures for everyone. Today, it literally seems to come out of a grim fairy tale, with half-timbered houses, breweries that serve authentic lager beers, and Oktoberfest festivals under Washington's mountains. But it's not just folklore. On the contrary, the position makes Leavenworth perfect for exploring the Alpine Lakes Nature Reserve, where there are lakes alongside peaks that exceed 8,200 feet. Dry Falls. 50 millennia ago, here flowed the most powerful waterfall the world had ever seen. The dry falls are what remains of a geological cataclysm. In fact, when the ice dams of Lake Missoula gave way, they released unimaginable volumes of water that carved canyons and created this rocky wall 400 feet high and over 3 miles wide. Today, silence reigns, where waterfalls 10 times more powerful than Niagara once roared. The Visitor Center tells the story through models that help imagine the flood's force, while from the viewpoint, the gaze embraces the Grand Coulee and the lakes that dot the desert. This is the demonstration that the landscape we see today is only the last frame of a story that began millions of years ago. Scablands. Welcome to the most alien landscape of the continental United States. The channeled scablands are an expanse of naked basaltic rock that extends for thousands of square miles in eastern Washington, where the soil has been literally torn away, leaving exposed the underlying volcanic stone. They are crossed by hundreds of dry canyons, or ones with temporary pools called coulées, and are gorges hundreds of feet deep but without rivers, as if someone had drawn giant scars on the earth. This impossible landscape was created about 18,000 years ago, when glacial Lake Missoula emptied catastrophically after the collapse of the ice dam. The megafloods that followed flowed with a force 10 times greater than all the world's rivers combined, carving instantaneous canyons, transporting boulders large as buildings, and creating dry waterfalls miles wide. Bering Bridge. A concrete bridge along Highway 2 might seem insignificant, but the Bering Bridge has become one of the most photographed symbols of the North Cascades. The old arch bridge from the 1930s perfectly frames the mountains that rise from the valley, creating a landscape that attracts various photographers. But what makes this place special is its history. Bering was a town born around the railroad that connected Seattle to the mountain mines, and this bridge represented the vital link with the outside world. Today, however, the town has disappeared, but the bridge remains witness to an era when America was built yard by yard, even and especially through impassable mountains. The river waters flow fast below, while salmon continue their migration toward the glaciers. This, therefore, is Washington, a kaleidoscope of natural and cultural wonders that challenge the imagination. And if you want to explore other fantastic places in America and in the world, choose from our playlist that you find here on the right.